Hello again. As he mentioned, my study abroad experience was not an internship. I was abroad with C semester. We spent the first 6 weeks in Woods Hole, which is outside Boston, over on that side of the U.S., and then we sailed over the course of 7 weeks, all the way from San Diego to Tahiti. So I've never really liked being the center of attention. I still don't particularly, which is a little bit ironic, but I much prefer to work as part of a group. This is a big part of why C semester really attracted me. It's hard to get more cooperative than sailing over 4,000 nautical miles of the Pacific as crew of a tall ship. The other big draw for me was the opportunity to conduct scientific research on board the ship. However, that is also not the focus of my talk, even though it could be its own entire subject. So we started out on shore, preparing both academically and socially for life aboard ship. Part of that was learning to come together as a class, and part of that was preparing and eating dinner together pretty much every night. This is one meal with most of our class. Getting ready to head to sea. This is the boat we were on, by the way. Her name's the Seaman's. We were all full of all sorts of anticipation and excitement. We'd seen that we worked well together as a class. We'd gotten excited about the oceanography that we were going to learn at sea, and couldn't wait to see where this would take us. I personally, at least, was also a little bit worried. We, at sea, became completely isolated with our little community. No internet, no phones, nothing. Nowhere to go except for these 134 feet of boat if you were having a bad day or wanted to get away from someone. You were completely isolated. However, as soon as we got on the boat, we were instantly thrown into learning everything and more about how to live aboard and operate this vessel. So this picture shows just a few of the many lines whose names and purposes we had to learn in the first handful of days. We also had to learn everything else from how the lab procedures worked, which are startlingly different from land laboratories in many ways, and also everything about cleaning the ship, which again is surprisingly complicated and involved. It was incredibly overwhelming, but we learned pretty quickly to feel more comfortable with following orders and knowing what to do. We also learned to feel more comfortable to rely on our watch. So as a class, we were divided into 3 groups, one of which was always on. This was my watch, who we worked together very closely. As we adjusted, we, pretty much as soon as we had made this adjustment, we were thrown into the next stage of our journey, junior watch officer and junior lab officer. During this, for each watch time, one student was pretty much in charge of the deck. They were handed at the beginning of the watch, or before the watch, a list of expectations from the captain of what needed to happen during that watch period, and then it was really up to them to make sure that all of those things happened safely and in a timely manner. The watch officers were present and watching over everything, but they were really only going to stop you if it was going to risk injury or something that they couldn't fix in less than 2 hours. They were more than willing to let us make whatever mistakes we needed to make. Because of this, in part, there was never a dull watch. My very first watch as junior watch officer, I was incredibly frazzled the entire time because in the first half hour, we saw a ship. At this point, we were pretty thoroughly in the middle of the Pacific Ocean and had not seen a ship for probably a week. So I had no idea how to deal with this. I spent most of that watch looking at my watch officer saying, "Help me, I don't know what to do." even on slightly more normal watches, slightly calmer watches, the hours still piled on top of each other, as did the responsibilities. As soon as one thing was finished, you should have been doing or having someone do the next thing 5 minutes ago. This caused a lot of frantic sailors, me and everyone else. This was a contrast, however, to the rest of the time on board. Since we were such an isolated community, no Facebook, no texting, none of that, we were able to spend a lot more time as a community, just talking, contemplating, making music. Part of this, or one of the times that I found this different pace of life very noticeable was on bow watch. At all times, the ship is large enough that she is legally required to have a person standing at the bow, at the front of the boat, just watching the horizon, looking for any other ships, any clouds that might mean storms, and seeing if anything hazardous is coming our way. This 1 to maybe 3 hours at a time was a great time to just sit back and contemplate life, the beauty of the environment, what you were doing, and also your future. That sounds cliche, but it's true. We also got a chance to go ashore in the Marquesas. This relatively untouched island was a whole other interesting cultural and social experience. But my major takeaway from this was that there was an internet cafe, and many people brought their smartphones ashore and called home. I really had no desire to borrow a phone, call home. They knew I was alive. The boat posted a blog, and I was happy to stay within our own little self-contained community. Over the course of this trip, I learned to lead. In addition to starting out relying on others, I learned that to become more comfortable letting others rely on me. I gained comfort in delegating tasks. I also stopped feeling, by the end of the trip, so many steps behind. I was able to, at the beginning of a watch, make out my list of what needed to happen, and then trust that I would remember the next thing when it was time for it, and not be trying to think 7 steps ahead, and therefore losing the step that I was actually on. Another thing I realized was that I was worried going into it that I would be bored on Voyage. I knew this was a thing that we would be needing to do, but instead it became one of my favorite parts of the boat experience. The other thing I was worried about, needing alone time, at least in part because Voyage provided that time, was not a concern. However, it wasn't just Voyage. The community that we formed, our own little self-contained floating family, really became a home that I was more than happy to stay in and not have to leave. Thank you.